talking about the crime scene, and dead bodies are part of the crime scene. So that's our focus for today. Here's our schedule from our Canvas page. We are going to look at the textbook chapter on autopsies, death and autopsies. And we'll focus in on medical examiners and what they do. We are going to take a look at the study guide for the upcoming test on this unit. It's on Chapter 4, Crime Scene Investigation, which you just wrapped up with your lab write-up. I'll be starting to look at those this weekend. And then this unit also includes the body, like I mentioned. That's Chapter 14. So I have a study guide for you. It is not an assignment for you to turn in, but I'm going to click into it in a moment, and I'm going to show you the important parts for you to understand for the upcoming test, which is right here, October 7th. So we've got today's class and one more, and we'll wrap up the content for this unit. And GCU, when they were here, Jessica Haggerty, when she was talking to us, she mentioned a program where they have like virtual labs with GCU. So I'm trying to set up something autopsy related and having you guys learn how to do sutures. So that will be right after our test on October 7th. Then we just start having quite a bit of analysis with our trace evidence that you collected. You collected 5 things at your crime scene. They're in the envelope. They were brought back to the lab, and now you guys are going to analyze those. We'll start with the hair, and then we'll do fibers, then we'll do soil, and we'll talk about metals. And then glass was also in there. And we also are going to be doing a little bit with blood this semester, but next semester we really get into blood spatter analysis. But we'll take a look at what you collected there, that piece of red coloration on a shirt. So those are the 5 things. So please open up your Canvas page. And as I mentioned, this is not an assignment, so you need to go into the module. Couple of buttons to get there, obviously. I also am going to do a split screen with our textbook. So if you'd like to do that too, just to keep pace, it is much better if you follow along, because I know that you could be surfing the internet, you could be watching videos, you could be on your phone behind your iPad. You know, that's pretty typical behavior. So you should zero in. There's a time and place for entertainment, and you know, it's not during class. So you could really do yourself a good favor by paying close attention today, because this material is on the upcoming test. If you want to improve on your test scores, then get involved with the material a little bit more. So there's 2 chapters here. Would you read the chapters yourself? Would you look it over, or are you just trying to get whatever you got by osmosis during class? So if you get A's on homework and C's and D's on tests, there's a big gap there. It's easy to copy homework. Hey buddy, can I get the homework? I didn't get a chance to do it. All right, great, thanks. You get it emailed, change the name, turn it in. Change a little bit, right? You don't know what was in it, but you feel good because you got the homework done. But that type of behavior in college will be very evident. The material in college, I thought I was ready for college after high school. I was a pretty high B student in high school, involved like you guys. Got to high school and found it at least 10 times harder. So the quality of work and the amount of work really increases. So it's a cakewalk right now, and some of you are on your victory lap and want to just do either a good job or, hey, I'm already accepted in college, you know, I'm done. But no, prove to yourself that you are going to be ready for college. I think if you don't get an A in this class, you're really leaving a lot of effort, and God's given you the gifts to do very well. So I think we owe it to Him as a thank you for our intellect and for being here at Mater Dei. So please click into the study guide. Have you found it? in our module. The crime scene study guide for it's really a unit 2 test, not chapter 2 test. So here it is, study guide. I didn't give you a PDF file, but it might be good for you to just highlight all this, copy it, and paste it into Notability or Pages, wherever you like to take notes. It says that it's not homework, but if you don't prepare and drill and practice this, then, you know, tests are hard. So we're going to be going over chapter 14. They don't read as questions, but these are the objective for you to understand. So take a few short notes, highlight the textbook. You know, our textbook at CK12, if you're logged in, you can highlight the text. And as I mentioned, the more you get involved with actually doing something during class, taking notes, highlighting, it wires your brain to a depth that is much more detailed than if you just sit back in the back of the bus. So when you engage yourself, you learn a lot more. It goes into your long-term memory. So we're going to be talking about that. I'll leave it up here on the side. And I'm going to scroll through the textbook. So this is chapter 14 in our textbook. And there are a couple of careers listed right up here at the top. Pathology and anthropology. These two relate to using the body to try to determine cause and manner and mechanism of death. We'll talk about that. And try to recreate the crime and what happened, the sequence of events. Anthropometry, sometimes they can take just a couple of bones, especially the skull, and they can do a very good recreation of what the person looks like. And we'll see that in the video that we'll watch on Tuesday. So an autopsy is actually a surgery. It has to be done by a surgeon, a medical doctor. So some people choose this path after they get their college degree and they get their doctor's license. So they go through the same thing as if they're operating on a real person, but in this case, it is called postmortem. That's the word for after death. So it is something that is an autopsy isn't done for everyone that dies. If you're under the care of a doctor and they know that you're sick and they're treating you and then you pass away from this natural cause, there's no autopsy needed. They know the reason why. But it says up here, if it's foul play and it's a healthy person and now they have to determine, was this suicide? Was it homicide? Was it natural causes? So that is the purpose for this, and it gives closure to the family. Even if it wasn't a crime, if someone just died and they don't know why, is it a drug overdose? Was it something with the heart? So that's really important for the family to understand. It builds their family history, and sometimes it's genetic and within the family. So a pathologist is also a medical examiner. So a pathologist, that word means that they're really good after they take the autopsy. They take slices of tissues and organs, and they can even put it under a microscope, and they can determine, hey, this person has cancer, or there's an anomaly in this organ. This contributed to their death. So it's someone that can really look down at the cellular level instead of just doing the cutting and opening up of the body. It's someone that is the go-to answer person. An anthropologist, the skeletal remains, as I mentioned, we'll see how they can really do a great job of recreating someone's facial features just from the skull. I'm wondering if I pass the word. There are two people that are going to certify that someone died. It's a medical examiner and a coroner. So the two are different. You all could be a coroner, even without a college degree. If you are in politics and you're appointed by the city or the county to go out and to certify that someone is deceased, that's a coroner. No medical treatment. We all could go to a scene and certify, yep, this person is dead. We wouldn't know why they died, but a death certificate is started by a coroner. On all of our death certificates, it's going to have a place for manner of death. And we'll talk about the 5 manners of death. They want to get that right. Sometimes they're not sure, so in rare cases, they will write down on the death certificate, unknown. But they'll work very hard at determining the reason. So when we die, there is a sequence of decomposition. So there are 5 stages of decomposition. We're going to come back to this topic near the end of school in May when we talk about bugs. So bugs do the decomposition. And at a crime scene, they will collect the body and they'll collect the bugs that are on the body and around the body, under the body, in the soil, because it becomes a feast for the insects. There are flies that will lay their eggs on a corpse within seconds, if not minutes. So very little time will pass when bugs will know that this is a dead organism. And they proceed to lay their eggs in the orifices of the eyes and the ears and the nose and the mouth. And these hatch in one day. And this is the fresh stage. So the first few days is the fresh stage. And as soon as the heart stops, the blood goes down to the low point of gravity. This is a sure clue on the position of the body when it died. A lot of times the body is moved and you've got to ask, hey, who moved the body? Because we know they died on their back, but now they're laying on their stomach. So we'll go over that here in just a minute. It's in this chapter. So then the larva, which is what you call the developmental stage of a fly after it hatches from an egg, and they go through 3 larval stages. These suckers eat like crazy. They can eat all the flesh in a body within a week, all the way down to bones. And that's the larva of insects doing the job of decomposition. Bacteria is all over us on the outside and on the inside. We have something like 5 pounds of bacteria in our intestines. They do the job of our digestion. We're not capable with our digestion of breaking through plant cell walls. So when you eat salads and vegetables, the bacteria do most of the digestion for us. Once they crack through the cell wall, then our enzymes can do the rest. So bacteria are our friends. They're all over us. They tend to get a bad name. There are some that cause diseases, but for the most part, they are in us and on us. So when we die, they have a field day, right? We take showers and clean, and so they get off of us, but after we die, they just grow and multiply. They can grow and divide every 20 minutes. So during this class, you could go through 3 generations of bacteria on you at ideal temperatures. Then the bacteria, they're going through their process and they keep producing gas. So when we have bad cases of gas, we're making our bacteria unhappy. Maybe you fed them a different type of diet that you normally do, and they can't handle it as much and they produce more gas. So the gas comes from the bacteria in our gut, not from our intestines themselves. So when we die, that bacteria can make the body swell up to twice its size. And then it's going to crack the skin open. Gases are going to be released. It's a pretty bad smell and stuff. I've even seen, I have seen a dead whale on a beach in Australia, and they also swell with the bacteria. And on YouTube, I've seen a video where the whale swelled to twice the size. It was like a big balloon ready to burst, and somebody came over there with a spear because they were going to do a necropsy. That's what you call it, an autopsy with animals. They poked it, and the thing exploded from all the gas inside. Body parts for the whale went flying like hundreds of feet in the air and everywhere. So the bloating process is from the bacteria. They're anaerobic. They don't need oxygen to do their thing. And so it really does get bloated. Then active decay is when those bacteria and the maggots from the insects, after they break through the skin, then they are going to take it all the way down to bones. Other insects will come in and start feeding off of the larva. So now it becomes a whole ecosystem right there with the body. If you're working the crime scene, you would collect all the insects there because you want to know how old the insects are. They go through a known sequence of growth. And so if you know that the insects are 21 days old, then you just backdate it and you find out when that body was first put there. Advanced decay, then, at the stage where the carcass has been reduced to hair, skin, and bones. The fly population really is gone. It's replaced by other arthropods that are going to feed on the remaining hard-to-eat tissues like tendons and stuff. And then it goes down to dry remains. There is a bit of science to it, as I was mentioning, with the life cycle of insects. And there are experts that are called in to testify, hey, how old is this corpse? And the foremost expert testified that this body is no more than 3 weeks old, and it turned out that he was a couple hundred years off. There are some circumstances where the body is preserved, and it still looked fresh after 200 years. It had an airtight coffin. It was in the right type of soil that the insects couldn't get down into. So oddly enough, 6 Feet Under is the name of a TV show. It's about the morgue and getting bodies ready for burial. And 6 feet under is the depth that we're usually buried. And insects can even go down that deep. And they make their way into the casket. So all the things that I explained right here usually happens inside the casket. So let's talk about the autopsy now. The autopsy is performed so that you can figure out the cause of death. And here it talks about, you're going to go to medical school, you're going to have 4 years of postgraduate training, you're going to have a, a residency where you're basically working for free while you're learning the ropes from another doctor. But then some people choose to do this in the morgue. And it is a process. The body is part of the crime scene, so before he does his autopsy, he's going to call in the CSIs, and they come and they gather all the evidence that they want. They'll do hair samples, different kits to determine if violence has occurred. They'll do fingernail scrapings. They'll take pictures. And they'll work the body for as long as it takes for them to get the evidence, because the The body, when it's processed, it's going to be washed. It's going to be completely opened up. Every organ will be removed. First studied in situ, which means in place with all the others. Then they cut out each organ. They weigh it. They look at it for any abnormalities. And they're trying to determine, is this organ okay? Does it have cancer? Has it been damaged in a car accident? Did the bullet go through this part of the body and nick this artery, and so they bled to death? All that is going to have to be determined. They look for clues. So the external examination happens first. So after the CSIs are done, then the medical examiner will examine it again on the exterior. More with that critical eye, looking for entrance wounds and exit wounds and any sign of trauma from the outside before they make any incisions. Then they'll do the internal examination. And so I was mentioning some of that. It's usually a Y incision from shoulder to shoulder down to the belly button, past the belly button. And then they're able to open up the chest after breaking through the rib cage. They'll also, if they have to, they'll reflect the scalp, pull all the skin off of it, and then cut the scalp with a saw so they can get at the brain. They may even remove the brain and then look at it later. We saw that in the video when we went to the Las Vegas crime scene on the video. They have a room where they have these body parts, and so they'll do this, and then when they're not actively having to do an autopsy on someone, then they go back and they do their fine work of looking at these organs. So how are we doing over here on the worksheet? The similarities and differences between a pathologist, medical examiner, and coroner. Medical examiner is a doctor. Coroner is a public official. Just like in The Wizard of Oz, he went over there and pronounced that the Wicked Witch was dead, and he pulled out a piece of paper. They're just the legal person. A pathologist is more of an expert than a medical examiner, and they can determine from down to the tissue and cellular level what might be the cause and manner of death. So we're now going into the details of the autopsy, number 10. And number 11, it says it's not part of the exam. It's listed here in the textbook. I don't think these are particularly difficult, especially if you've had anatomy class. And they're good words to know. I mean, it's how things are discussed if you go to the doctor's office. So you could look over those words, but know that they're not on the test. You know, our thoracic cavity, our abdominal cavity, and then we have membranes around our heart. That's called the pericardial cavity, and we also have membranes around our lungs, our pleural cavity. So they're going to dissect the body within these cavities and kind of work them together. Dorsal and ventral, you should know those words, your back and your belly. And you don't need to know the planes of the body. So we'll go down here to the types of mortis. We're on question number 12. So this is on the test. It's probably got 4 or 5 questions about this. So when the body first expires, it is going to go through these changes in the human body after death. It's not the decomposition changes, it's really just clues as to how long the body has expired. The first one, it's called Rigor Mortis. We're at 98.6 degrees. We're like 20, 30 degrees warmer than the room. And after we die, then we go to room temperature. And it's at a rate of approximately 1 degree per hour. It does depend on how cold the room is, how windy it is, and things like that. So they take a look at the weather in the area. If someone was found outside, they're going to chart the temperature, and they can take that into account and work it out to the day that someone died, just based on losing our body temperature. So at a crime scene, you see it in the TV programs a lot. The medical examiner is there at the fresh crime scene, and then they stick a thermometer in the chest, and they just determine what their temperature is, and that's a good clue. Rigor mortis. This is the stiffening of our bodies. If you took anatomy and physiology, you know the actual actin and what is it? The two muscle fibers, actin and starts with an M. It's not myosin, I don't think. So there's two parts, and our muscle fibers go across each other and then they stick. So it's all chemical based. All of our muscles are primed and ready for the signal from our brain to go, all right, move. But after death, there's no brain signals, but all the muscles are ready to contract. And so that's what happens. After about 6 hours, it says about 2 hours, but you know, there's a range in there. The body's nice and flexible for several hours right after death, but then all of the muscles are going to start to do their thing. They all contract at the same time. All of our muscles work in opposing fashion, right? The bicep pulls the arm up, the tricep pulls it down. So all of our appendages have two action muscles, but they all fire at the same time, so you can't move someone after they've hit rigor. It is this stiffening. And so it starts about 6 hours, they say, appears up to 2 hours, and then it peaks at 12, and then after 24 hours, then we're limp again. So if you approach a crime scene and someone's in rigor, you know that they've died within that day right there, and if they know when they relax, then it helps them also determine more or less the time of day that they died. The next one, it's pallor. That word describes your coloration. So after the heart stops, our blood, which is coursing all through our bodies out to the surface, and you know, if someone blushes, their blood vessels open up, and then more blood goes to near the surface. But when we die, all the blood pools to gravity, and so it takes all the blood and coloration out of the skin. You get really white and pasty looking. And this last one here, Rigor Mortis. Again, when the heart stops, the blood settles to the lowest part in gravity, and it will discolor the skin. Where Pallor mortis was real white, where all the blood pools, it's all red. So, and that red color stays there. Even if they died on their back and they have the red coloration from the blood pooling on their back, and you flip them over, it's not like all the blood is going to then go down to the new lower part of gravity. It will still stay as a bruising on the original spot where they had the pooling of the blood. So make sure you keep those straight. Algor means temperature. Rigor means muscle tightening. Pallor means losing colors because the heart has stopped. And Rigor Mortis is when you have bruising. Now we're on question 13, or item 13, since these aren't questions. The scope of work of an anthropologist. How do they determine the age of bones? Well, an anthropologist is someone with that specialty about understanding skeletons. And they can recreate a crime scene because sometimes that's all that's left. I mean, that's a pretty sad mass grave right there, and they would be able to determine a lot about the individual right there just from the skeletal remains. And so that's the job of an anthropologist. I was talking about the body farm just a little bit ago, and we're going to come back to that in May. The body farm is connected to the University of Tennessee, and that's that specialist who was the #1 anthropologist. and he had been to court a couple hundred times, and then he's starting to realize, I don't know very much. I'm getting this wrong. Maybe I'm putting people in jail that don't belong there. So he got something like 50 acres. People donate their bodies to science all the time to be cadavers for medical students so that they can practice on dead bodies. But some people are going to donate their body to science to the body farm, where they study the decomposition of people out in nature in various scenarios. Buried underground and poured cement over, like some people do to hide a body in a construction site or under a patio. Dying with your clothes on, dying with your clothes off, and in different types of weather. So they study it like a science experiment, and it's connected to the University of Tennessee. What can the bones say? This is important right here. So you would highlight this and make sure that you would understand that they can really determine a lot. They can determine, obviously, if it's human or not. They can even do DNA analysis on it. On our next class, we're going to look at the oldest autopsy and the oldest known murder victim. You'll be astonished how they can get so much information out of this guy. They can tell the general age of someone, especially a younger person. Up to about age 25, even you guys are still having some of your bone plates completely finish their job of growing. So there's still a little bit of gap there in some joints like the knee. Very young kids have the bones of the skull still kind of open. Like a newborn and a 1-year-old, they have a little soft spot right up here. That's the fontanelle. It's a spot where the bones haven't come together yet. So there are a few places where they can look at that and see and get the general age. They can tell the sex, especially with the pelvis. There's different shapes to it because females' pelvises are wider to fit the head of the child through. And also the height and sometimes the length of the bones really can tell. And with the skull, they can tell general races. Because people didn't travel around much up until like the 1800s, humans have different bone structures based on the geographic regions because the DNA was refined in those areas. And obviously they can tell skeletal injury. So if someone had a problem with their knee, they could then, just like with teeth, they can go to the doctors and a lot of times these days too, there's serial numbers on hip replacements and different supporting pins that are put into people's skeletons. And so if that's left behind, they just scan that, look in the database, and now they know who they're dealing with. And the teeth are a really good marker too. Like if you have cavities on certain teeth, they can check with the local dentist and try to find matches there. So an anthropologist also can perform facial reconstruction. We're going to see that in a video. It's amazing how they can do that. Can you imagine after 9/11 when those two buildings came down? There were thousands of people in there, and they weren't whole bodies. They were just ground up body parts. And they did a really good job of finding and identifying almost everyone. So that's the job of the anthropologists and medical examiners. So after natural disasters, they identify the human remains. So some of the pictures I was talking about, the sutures are where bones, where they're growing together. That's where they touch, and that's the point of the end of the bone growth. So they kind of study that. A little bit more about the different gender and using the bones for that. Race can be determined in 3 categories: Asia and Native American, European, and African have slightly different skulls. Forensic odontology. So now we're down to item number 14. Odontology is a dentist. Odont is tooth, so it's the examination of the teeth that might be the only thing left behind with the skeleton. A lot can be learned from that. Some cases are determined solely on the teeth, getting the right victim or the right perpetrator. We're going to see a case study where they were on to the individual who they knew committed this crime, but then that person killed themselves by standing in front of a train, and he got completely mutilated, but they were able to get some of his dental records and match his up, and so they knew that they finally closed the case with odontology. We're going to watch the details of the Iceman murder mystery. Who was he? What did they find out? Where did he die? When did he die? How did he die? And they even got down to why someone may have killed him. And this is an Iceman from a long, long time ago. So we'll get the details of that. There are several questions on the test for Dr. G Medical Examiner, how an autopsy is performed. You guys looked at a video when I was absent, and it was on the 5 ways not to die, 5 common ways that people don't realize can kill them, and more or less bad behaviors that we should all be aware of so that we don't add to that statistic. So what is this cause, mechanism, and manner of death? This is a website that I'm going to take you to. It's a hyperlink, so I'm going to click into it. Number 17. This is what the medical examiner's job is. On our death certificate, they're going to write one of these 4 things. Hopefully not 5, which is undetermined, unknown. We're either going to die from natural causes, an accident, suicide, or homicide. Those are the 4 manners of death. Those are broad categories. Anything going wrong with your biology, a heart attack, just a ruptured aorta, like John Ritter, the TV star. He was on set, and it was just a genetic disposition. He had weak artery, and it's right up here, the main artery that left the heart. It bursts. It's really wide, and so you bleed out really quickly within a matter of 5 minutes or so. So that's natural. The number 1 killer for young people is accidents, so be careful out there. We have lost modern day students after graduation and then also while they're here at school. So we've lost like junior students and stuff from accidents. So you have to be careful. And obviously suicide and homicide. So we're going to talk about these other words. There is some confusion. We just went over the manners of death, but what does it mean by cause and mechanism? All right, the cause is what caused the injury? An accident, like a car accident? But you've got to be a little bit more specific. Was the car accident gave you a big bump on the head? So that would be the cause. A gunshot is a cause. A knife is a cause. But that's just the cause. What happened after the cause? That's the mechanism. The mechanism is biologically, why did you die? Sure, you got hit in the head. We've all been like conked in the head before with a ball or running around a corner and bumping heads with someone. But did it cause a swelling of the brain, and then that swelling caused pressure, and it caused you to lose electrical signal, and that caused the heart to fail? So that's the mechanism. If someone gets shot or knifed, they're going to bleed to death. The word for that is sanguination. And so that's the mechanism. A ruptured aortic artery, and you bleed to death. So that's the mechanism. The manner would be natural if it happened just with your own biology, or an accident, or a homicide. So be able to explain the difference between cause, mechanism, and manner of death. That's on the test. I've given you 3 Kahoots right here, one on death, cause, and manner and mechanism, CSI and collecting evidence at a crime scene, and crime scene investigation. Just a fun way of determining how ready you are after looking over this information. Don't just play these several times and think that you're memorizing questions and answers, because the test will ask them a little differently, but you can use those just to help yourself with the overall scope. So then review chapter 4, and here are 8 key points for you to take notes on. So hopefully you've done that here for the chapter 14 as we talked about it today. And it would be really good for you to make up your own study guide. So review the information in the textbook. For chapter 4, I think you answered the questions at the bottom. No, that was before. They even give you the answers at the bottom of that chapter. So look over those questions. It's a 50-point test. It's probably like 40 questions, and it'll probably take about 20 minutes or so. So that's coming up next week. What we're going to do for the remainder of the class is we're going to look at a video. It's called Toe Tags. When we die, we're going to have an identifying tag on your toe. And so this is from the original CSI show, and it's going to feature the medical examiner and the CSIs trying to determine why people have died. So we'll do that right now.